Hello everyone and welcome to the recording of our lunchtime webinar on using tests in the VLE. My name's Rosie Hare and I'm the e-learning support officer in the e-learning development team at the University of York. Today's session is focusing on the use of tests within the VLE, and we'll go through some of the ways in which they can be used within a module to enhance the taught face-to-face aspects of a course. I'm going to focus on the pedagogic benefits of why you might use tests, and we'll highlight some case study examples of how they've been used across the university. It's not going to be a technical step-by-step guide to setting up tests. However, I will provide some links at the end to technical guides on how to set up tests within the VLE, and either myself or members of our team are available to book for consultations if you're wanting to set up a test in your VLE module and you don't know where to start. Our team can also provide group training to staff in any department if required, and I'll provide contact details at the end of this recording. For those who are watching via our YouTube channel, any links that are mentioned throughout this presentation are also available in the YouTube comments, so have a look in there. So what can VLE tests be used for? Why might it be beneficial to use them, and how can they be used, and what are some ways in which they have been used? They can be used for formative or summative assessments, although this session focuses mostly on formative use of VLE tests within a module. They can be set up as part of a flipped learning model, where students are presented with materials in advance of a class and need to pass a test in the VLE to show that they have understood the materials before attending the session. There's a case study example of this that I'll show you in a moment. Tests can be used so that students can practice their skills and test subject knowledge to complement weekly reading and other activities, and it's also possible to set up mobile compatible tests to give students the flexibility to study wherever they like on whichever device they prefer. VLE module content can also be structured around tests, meaning that new content isn't released to students until they have achieved a certain pass mark on a test. An example of this in practice is the university's academic integrity tutorial, which does not allow students to progress to the next section until they have achieved a 100% pass mark on the previous section. So the way that's set up, it uses a tool in the VLE called adaptive release. As soon as students hit the required pass mark, that then can release other content that complement their weekly work, so you can actually plan your module and structure the content around these tests. So why might the VLE's test tool be the best option rather than setting paper-based formative exercises? What are some of the benefits of using these tests? Staff support in terms of the reduction in marking workload is a significant factor, especially when teaching large cohorts. This is a big benefit. Most of the question types can be marked automatically due to predefined correct answers. However, it is important to note that setting up good tests in the first place, the effort is very much front-loaded with this, so this can be seen as a bit of a drawback. I will cover one of the solutions to getting around this in a moment as well, something that can help you to avoid the effort being solely on one or two members of staff. From the learner's perspective, the tests provide instant feedback, and you can allow students to take the test multiple times to keep practicing skills or testing their knowledge. With question types such as the short answer question, as shown in the screenshot here, you can provide model answers so that students can actually compare their own answers with an ideal model answer that you've entered previously. There are also a variety of question types that you can use to help facilitate the more higher order thinking skills, so students aren't just resorting to guessing on multiple choice questions. The questions aren't just based on factual recall. An example of this is, as I just mentioned, the short answer question or the essay question. You could set students' work such as a case study or materials that they need to look at, and then they need to construct an answer based on the work that they've done by looking at the materials. So you might want them to analyse something, they might have to evaluate something, and part of this can be typing their answers into the test. Obviously, one thing with the short answer questions or the essay questions, they do need to be marked manually. It's not possible to mark those types of questions automatically, so that does need to be taken into account as well. And just on the screen now, you can also see a couple of examples of other question types. The one on the right here, the image, that's used in one of the case studies I'll mention in a moment in linguistics and phonetics. So it's called a hotspot question, which allows you to put in an image, any image, and then you can identify as an instructor the correct points on the image that you want students to click. So this could be used for anything such as a map, obviously anatomy and things related to this question. And it's just an option there, a different sort of option rather than a multiple choice. And again, on the left-hand side here, you can see the instructor setup for a calculated formula question. And this uses a tool that allows you to pre-enter a formula, and then students can answer based on a number of different variables. An instructor can specify the variables, and the formula is there so that the system knows how to work out the correct answer depending on the numbers that the students enter. So students can't actually see the answer formula part of the question. That's just for staff to program into the question at the start. It's also possible to award partial credit for questions such as the formula question and other numeric questions that you can use in tests. So that is also an option if you're wondering about whether you can award partial credit for if students have done some working out but not actually got the correct answer. VLE tests also provide easy reporting and analysis of student responses, and they allow you to monitor the quality of questions through statistical analysis. So each test allows you to run something called item analysis, and you're able to actually assess student performance and see what questions might not be the best indicators of student performance and edit the test accordingly based on this information. So this next section focuses on how you would set tests up and how they have been used already in existing modules here at York. You can put a test anywhere you want in a content area on the VLE. You just need to go to the area you want, click Assessments and Tests, and select Tests. For those who are wondering about technical instructions, you can find them in the YouTube comments below, linked to some technical guidance on how to set up tests, and also just get in touch with us if you get stuck at any time. It's possible to set up question pools, which are banks of questions that can be used on a number of different tests. You can use questions from these question pools and add them into different tests, into one test by adding them as what's called a random block. So you can see here, if you look at the top example, numbers 1 to 4, 4 of the questions are taken from a block of 10. And every time a different student takes this test, it'll always be a random selection of 4 questions from that block of 10. So that is also one way to provide some variation in the test. If students are actually sat together working and you've set up tests with random blocks, they're not necessarily going to be presented with the same questions. Makes it a bit more difficult to perhaps copy answers off each other and make them actually work to put the answers in. But also it gives you the freedom to set up the question pools with lots of different questions, with lots of different areas of difficulty, such as you can see on this screenshot. Some of them are easy and some are hard. And then you can set up a test accordingly, drawing on questions from these different pools. I also mentioned earlier there is something that you can do to get away from a lot of the effort and pressure being put on you as an instructor to set up these tests. There is some rapid response funding available from the Academic Support Office. You can visit the link here on the screen or contact Janet Barton for more information. It is possible, and some of the case studies I'll mention in a moment have used this before. You can apply for a little bit of funding. You could perhaps use that to hire a postgraduate student, a PhD student, master's student, to actually help you with inputting the questions into the VLE and helping you get these tests set up and running. You can also write questions so that students have to make use of other resources, both within and outside the VLE, in order to be able to answer them. So as I mentioned earlier, some of these questions could be to tap into the more higher order thinking skills that students need to be able to learn effectively. Questions based on key reading for that particular week. There could be some information some case study information that students need to work on, to do some analysis, to do some evaluating of that information before they're able to answer, rather than just guessing, rather than just factual recall. Or in the case of the example here on the screen from the postgraduate diploma in Introduction to Astronomy, an opportunity here for students to do some working out and actually some mathematical work before they're able to provide an answer. So here are some case study examples of the ways in which VLE tests have been used across the university. The first one is from a module in Language and Linguistic Science called Introduction to Phonetics and Phonology. The link at the bottom there, the bit.ly link, that's from our original written up case study of this module from 2011, but the screenshots are actually from this academic year's version of this module. So this is something that is still in use today with this module. And what happened with this is that students, it was a large cohort, and they were tasked with having to learn and understand the sounds and symbols that make up the International Phonetic Alphabet as part of this introductory module. As you can see from the screenshot on the left-hand side, it was split into key themed areas with 2 weeks for each area. And in each section, there are lecture materials and links to other resources, as well as a practice test and a formative test, which you can see in that top right-hand screenshot there. The practice tests could be taken an unlimited amount of times by students, and the results of these are not tracked, so they can use this to practice using the actual test tool itself and also running through some practice questions as well. For the formative test, students only got one chance at this test, and the results were tracked through the VLE's Grade Centre, so staff were able to see the results that students had got on this formative test. It wasn't marked as such, there wasn't a final grade that was given for this, but because of the results being tracked, tutors were able to monitor this and identify students that were perhaps struggling, or identify the students that hadn't actually attempted the formative test that week. The tests were set up with pools of questions for each theme and subtopic. So the themes are obviously, as you can see, on the left-hand side. Because these screenshots are taken from the most current version of the module, but the case study is actually from a few years ago now, it just goes to show that if the work goes into setting up these tests initially, for a subject such as this that doesn't necessarily change a lot, the International Phonetic Alphabet, it's something that isn't going to change dramatically year on year, so it is something that the tests and the pools of questions can be reused. It's an example of an excellent way to use VLE tests. Language and Linguistic Science were also able to use some of the rapid response funding that I mentioned earlier. So as you'll see if you read the case study, they hired some postgraduate students to populate the questions within the VLE, and this was after the academic staff had designed the tests and put together the questions that they wanted to include. And as you can see from this screenshot here, you can see the list of the question pools that are in the current version of this module. And if you can see the dates on the right hand side, some of these are older than others, so it just goes to show how once these have been set up, they are able to be reused effectively. Our next case study example is from the chemistry department, and this we worked with a staff member called Nigel Law. In this case study, students on the practical work in chemistry module were required to achieve a minimum score on an online test before being able to enter the lab for practical work. This was an essential requirement, and if students didn't achieve the correct pass mark, they weren't able to enter the lab and start conducting experiments. And as you can see from this slide here, some of the tests, you can see that adaptive release is listed as enabled. Only the instructors can actually see this within a module. So this test has been set up so that each individual test has one question, and the next question will not be released until I have answered the question correctly. So this is a really effective example of how adaptive release can be used to release content gradually. And obviously if students do not answer the questions correctly, it means that they can't progress on to the next one, meaning that they're not going to be able to actually enter the lab that day. So that's a really, really effective example of how you can use adaptive release to gradually release content or release other questions within a test. You'll also be able to see from the case study link, the bit.ly link at the bottom of the screen there, that some of the examples of the resources that were included in these quizzes that were created especially, filmed within labs at York, and then added to these quizzes to help students with the health and safety. Similar formats are still in use today for the Year 1 students and also for Year 2 and 3 students in chemistry. So this is something that has been used right across the board for practical work, and it's something that has worked really effectively for a number of years now. If you do have any questions about anything like this, setting up adaptive release, perhaps about creating resources to go alongside tests, do please get in touch and let us know. And finally, our third case study is what's called VLE exam. Now, this is our summative use of the VLE's test tool, and this is used in a lockdown desktop version of the VLE in a PC classroom. This exam is completed under exam conditions with invigilators and a member of the e-learning development team who are alongside for technical support. You'll be able to see from the case study that it was a mixture of multiple choice. 2/3 of the exam is made up of multiple choice questions which are automatically marked, and there are also some open-ended essay questions within VLE exam. This has resulted in a big reduction in marking workload. It was for a very large cohort, and there were 160 students on that cohort this academic year. And as I said, a lot of the questions were marked automatically, so that's greatly reduced the workload for staff. If you do have any questions about VLE exam, because I know this recording is mostly focused on formative use of tests, but if you have any questions about VLE exam, I would suggest have a look at the case study that you can get to by following the link on the screen, and the link will also be in the YouTube comments. And please do get in touch if you'd like to find out more about this process. While this webinar has focused a lot on individual module tests used in individual modules as part of formative work, it is important to consider the way that formative assessment is designed into a programme as a whole. A lot of the current work that's going on at the moment with the York Pedagogy places a lot of emphasis on student work and talks about how student activity is one of the defining processes of learning. So this is something to definitely consider and perhaps work on as a department, and you'll be able to find more information about the York Pedagogy and the work that's going into that at the link on this screen, and also in the YouTube comments. The link will be there as well. And here are some further resources if you're thinking about setting up some tests from scratch. Blackboard Help, which is the help pages for our VLE software provider, that has all the technical guidance on setting up tests and also information on all the different question types you can use. And if you're interested in following up a bit of the research, a bit of the information and thinking that's gone into the York Pedagogy and the work around designing student work, the Higher Education Academy has done a lot of research into this, and there are some links there about the work they've done into designing directed independent learning opportunities. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions and would like to contact us, you can email us at vle-support@york.ac.uk. You can visit our WordPress website for more information about the case studies that I've shown you today, and also find us on Twitter at @UOY_Yorkshire. Thank you very much for listening.